likely scenarios of impact for similarly situated businesses, and then meet with members of the community outreach working group to identify possible mitigation. Mr. Nelson asked me if we could have some businesses participate in that exercise. I said, yes, we could. So that's one thing that we're doing. So
The answer to that question is yes.
within that concept, yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
The next.
This is actually, let me just, so the other thing we want, so we know that you guys get to 65% is very difficult to pass by. We know that's coming up in the next 2 to 3 months. So what the merchants are actually asking is about for them, not for staff or nonprofit. But will you commit to getting the approval of these groups of merchants that you've been meeting with, group of San Antonio and Eastlake, you commit to getting their approval of the plan that you come up with to minimize the harm of businesses before the 65% of the design phase is done, even if it means changing the project time?
As I said earlier, we are committed to working with you to develop mitigation. And when we do that, we will present that business impact mitigation plan as a condition of approval to the city of Oakland. So what we have an opportunity to do now, in these next 2 to 3 months, is work very closely together to identify those mitigations and look at those scenarios and make sure we have as complete and comprehensive business impact mitigation plan that we can. So we are committed to working with you to inform that.
So one follow-up, so if you don't come up with a plan that the merchants that you've been meeting with agree with, you're still going ahead and sitting down.
We will be developing a plan that we will present to the city.
So it doesn't matter.
No, well, I didn't know. Let me be clear. I didn't say it didn't matter. What I said was, if we are working with you to develop a plan with your input and your suggestions that reflect your concerns, that we will have a better business impact mitigation plan as a result, and we will take that to the city council.
So that means, in other words, my question is, unless we sit down and agree with what you come up with, then you will submit those plans, or without our approval, you still go ahead and submit the plan.
We have an obligation to submit the plan to the city of Oakland. We will do that.
So in other words, it doesn't matter. So
Well,
now that
no,
comes
but please, let me just be, thank you. But let me again say this. So we are here this morning because we have worked with Evasi and Andy to create an opportunity to engage businesses about the project. We can do more of these. We talked about the idea of looking at these scenarios and developing mitigations that would inform the plan. We will do that. So at the end of the day, we will have a plan that is informed and approved by the input from the businesses up and down the court. And we will present that to the city. So it does matter what the businesses say. We want to hear it. We want to give you opportunity to bring that forward. We will continue to do that.
This plan will be informed and approved by the business.
It will be informed by the input we get from the community up and down.
Can I just, no, yeah, go ahead, Grandma. Before you leave, you may want to respond to some after I talk to you. I'm going to try to be more specific about the questions they're asking. So is it okay if I'm now? Please. So greetings to everybody who's here, and some of you, people in San Antonio. I've been at numerous meetings with you, but the folks in East Lake, not. And so just a couple of prefacing remarks, and then I want to get very specific about the questions here. So this whole BRT project, has been worked on, I think, for 10 years by AC Transit, but it really kind of got advertised to the community starting about 2 years ago. And that outreach reached some merchants and not others. And it did, the people in San Antonio did hear about it and had a number of meetings, both general ones like this, and then some very specific merchant by merchant ones. And they, in San Antonio and other parts in East Oakland, sat down and looked at the very detailed maps that shows exactly what is happening happening on every block, where there's a loading zone, where there's parking being eliminated, where there's a left turn lane. I mean, you know exactly what's going on. And so there were, AC Transit did make some efforts to meet one-on-one with merchants there who were very specifically impacted. Like if there's a business that needs to do loading and unloading and the parking was being eliminated, they talked about what could be done. And in some of those circumstances, the AC Transit engineers were able to suggest modifications of the actual design that could address the situation. In some of the cases, there just wasn't anything anybody could figure out, and there's very likely to be, in those cases, a very serious impact on those businesses. I mean, maybe the business will go out of business, maybe it won't. So I'm going to get to the question here about the easement, but first, the reason the city council has voted to go forward with various steps of the bus rapid transit project is that it does have the potential to do some very positive things for the International Boulevard corridor. But it also has the potential to do some negative things. And so we were trying to weigh, you know, what's the balance of all this? So, you know, as they said, there's going to be a whole bunch of physical improvements. It's going to look a lot nicer. And it will transport riders faster up and down the corridor, which is, for the riders, a good thing. And the buses along International Boulevard this is the most heavily, it's got the highest ridership of anywhere in the whole AC Transit system. So there's really a lot of people in this whole East Oakland corridor who actually do ride the bus. And so, you know, we wanted to pay attention to them too. But, so that is why the city council said, okay, we'll go forward with this. The last time the city council voted on this, we said, yes, we'll go forward, but on these conditions, that AC Transit come up with mitigations for the businesses that are going to be harmed because of loss of parking and other things like that. So we've been waiting for those mitigations. AC Transit has told us, well, give us some time. We're, you know, by the time we get to the 65% completed design, you know, that's when you'll see the goods. Okay, so we're waiting for that. So, so anyway, this whole news really didn't get to the East Lake merchants until much more recently. And so, so there's a lot of one-on-one conversations that need to happen. What I am concerned about is that it has taken so long to even get to the point of having a very general meeting like this one, where nothing specific is solved, we just talk about generalities. And in 2 months, the 65% plan is supposed to be in front of the city council. So it's scheduled to come in mid-May, which is just a little over 2 months from now. And so I want to hear from AC Transit very specifically, will you have engineer-type people actually meeting with merchants who are losing parking or losing loading zones and coming, you know, and trying to analyze what possible changes or mitigations could be done? Because you're going to have to do that, I would think, in the next 3 to 4 weeks in order to actually impact any changes in the 65% design. So my question to you is, will you be, you know, look at those really detailed plans and do that kind of very detailed legwork, some of which was already done in San Antonio and other places. What I am perplexed by is sort of the generality of this conversation, that you're saying, yes, we'll hear you, your input will inform our stuff. Well, it's a bunch of work to have that happen. I mean, you really need the design people and the traffic engineer type people out here talking with them, looking at the map and trying to figure that out. So my question is, when is that going to happen?
I'm sorry, also may I say something too? Thank you. Thank you so much. That's exactly what we need. to hear from you. Also, is it possible that we bring in our own engineer? Can you fund us for that? Because this is very specific stuff. It needs some expertise. By the way, when you say that you go block by block, merchant by merchant, when we don't know what is going on, this is another level of expertise. Basically you put us in a corner and say, look, this is our thinking, this is what's happening. But we never hear the other side of the story, the negative impact for our businesses. So in a way, it's not fair.
Just because I know we got time, so we got two questions on the table. Councilwoman Kernahan has asked, Council President Kernahan has asked, when are you going to be specific business by business discussions with engineers in hand? Chief Tom has asked that some review basic transit pay for some consulting engineers so that the communities on the putting those are the questions on the table.
So Councilwoman, I can't tell you that we can do that tomorrow because I would have to talk with the design engineers to figure out where they are, how we can facilitate making that happen. I will take this back to the team and figure out how we can make more engagement with some businesses along the border happen very soon.
Okay, so that is not a satisfactory answer to me, and I know that you're, to me, that does not answer my question. But
Let me try to answer your
actually, because
question.
I know who needs to answer this question.
Let
which is
me
this
let me
gentleman.
do that then,
All
Councilman
right.
Kernahan. So this is a matter of timing. So the 65% design that we're submitting is not the end of the design effort, for one thing. But what it represents is the point where the design of the roadway alignment, the station architecture, the landscaping, all the different elements, communication systems, everything that are going to make the BRT work, are at a point where our agency partners go out and do the technical review. But as it affects the community in terms of this issue around business impacts, the timing of this is when we go into construction. So what that means is over the next few weeks, we are working with our agency partners to resolve design issues that are going to have an impact on what the final outcome of the parking impact is going to be along the corridor. We don't know that. We don't know that yet. Okay, for example, we are working with the cities of Oakland and San Leandro to address ADA ramps at the intersections. And depending on the size of the curb wall, for example, and how the ramp is located, that could possibly impact the amount of parking displacement along the corridor. But we're still working out those issues because of functional needs access requirements that we have to include in the design along the corridor. So it would be premature for us to have detailed discussions that you're talking about, say today. But in a few weeks, we're going to be able to start having them because the design is being solved in kind of a block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, and section by section area. So as those sections of the design get resolved, then it's our intention to come back out to the community through our outreach team that's sitting here with supporting technical staff at that time to have workshops and to go through exactly what we went through with you, Councilman Kernahan, a while back. We go block by block and say, this is what's going on in your neighborhood, and so let's talk about what potential impacts might be now that you have some more specifics around it. For example, in this corridor here on 12th Street, this is a southbound direction mixed flow for the BRT. So what you can expect to see in the future is not going to be much different than what you see now, except that there's going to be BRT station that's going to replace a local bus stop. But the BRT stations are going to only displace parking to create a curb wall so that the bus can just stay in the same travel lane that exists out there right now, pull up to the station platform, load and offload passengers, and go to the next one. So there's 3 of those curbside stations just in this segment between Lakeshore and 14th Avenue. There's no lane loss here, as your perception is. That's not true. There's no lane loss in this mixed flow section right here. And the same on International Boulevard in the northbound section going the other way. Those are curbside stations and mixed flow. The buses are going to load from curb ball outs, which in some cases exist because they're already there with the local bus stops. So just like the buses stop now, just like you load now for your businesses to load and unload, at least in this particular segment of the East Lake San Antonio area, that's not going to change in the future. But how much individual, I mean, we're literally counting individual parking spaces now. For example, if we look at this intersection right here, you have this curb ramp right here. The city of Oakland says, oh, well, we want to put bi-directional curb ramps there. Well, if you do that, you got to change the configuration of the curb, which may impact a parking space that could go here or here on the corner. It's those kinds of details that we're going through. We just reached consensus with our city partners on the overall geometric approval drawings for the entire quarter just earlier in January. So we're continuing to work through this. And I understand everybody's anxiety around this and the need to know now. But as Terry has indicated, this process that we have with the community outreach work, the process that we have set up to come back to you. In the coming weeks, it's going to be with specific workshops to go through, look at the blocks where your businesses are, go through, and look at every single aspect. Loading zones, for example, in our parking methodology, at least as it's written up to this point, any displacement of the loading zone along the corridor gets replaced within the same block. So we're not going to just eliminate loading zones and then they're gone. There are certain parts of the parking methodology that require one-to-one replacement, and loading zone is one of them. So there's not going to be any forced, removal of the loading zone, which obviously would impact the businesses. So the other thing is that the business impact mitigation plan that we are in the process of developing, and that we're going to be developing with your input and the input that we get from you after we have